Hey everybody, it's Kelly. Welcome back to another episode of Ask a Therapist. Today we're going to discuss the emotional manipulation in the Christmas story. This time of year can be really hard for people who have religious trauma, and I get that. Trust me, I do. But part of that is the actual use of the Christmas story for years in a lot of people's lives to emotionally manipulate the people who have heard it. And I think it's probably about time that we talk about how that happened. If you're somebody who has been in churches for a while, or somebody who was taken to church on Christmas and Easter, maybe with your family, and had to sort of sit through how Christians do Christmas Eve and the Christmas story, how do you feel about that story? In reality, it's kind of got it all, right? It's got young love, it's got drama, it's got a terrible leader that's out to get them, it's got a little baby and everybody who's happy and loving them, and just warm feelings at the end, right? It's cinematically a great story. That's kind of the problem. I worked in churches for a long time, and Christmas and Easter were the two big times that essentially you had to be on, right? As a church, you had to be ready to greet and to engage and really to kind of recruit. We didn't call it that, but that's high recruiting time for churches, because you got all these people who didn't normally show up, who came with their families, who came because they felt like they should, who came because they're looking for something because it's a crazy time of year for them. And you wanted to be able to give them a message that was going to grab them. You wanted to engage them in your church life and your community so that they would come back. And, well, the more people you have in your church, the more money you have coming in. And if you're part of a denomination, the more money you get from a denomination because you got more members. And oh my gosh, like the bigger the church, the better you are, right? That's how that works. I guess the bigger the church you are, the more you're God's favorite. But anyway, the planning of the church service versus the Christmas story, the emotional manipulation doesn't really stop. There's no shortage of emotional manipulation between the planning of the services, the story itself, the way we expect people to engage in it, and the amount that you are primed throughout the Christmas season. Those of you who know me might be surprised I'm doing this video. And I get it. But I do believe there can be a separation between the secular and the emotional celebration of the season and the expectation of the religious celebration of the Christmas story. The story itself, the way it's told, you are rooting for this young couple, right? You start out with this man who is, we are led to assume, in love with the woman that he's supposed to marry. We don't ever talk about the fact that she's like 13 years old, right? We don't talk about the fact that they're young because we're supposed to ignore that, because like people do this stuff young back then and it's not a big deal, I guess. Seems like a problem. But he's given this word about how she's pregnant and he hasn't known her, so he's about to dismiss her. Like he's gonna dump her because she is pregnant with some other dude's kid. He gets a dream from an angel and is told not to break up with her, but to marry her because this is God's child. She finds out she's pregnant. At some point along the way, she goes to see her cousin who is also pregnant, and the babies in their womb jump with joy. Like there's this whole mythology around this pregnancy to begin with that everyone is supposed to be very excited about this pregnancy. There's an intersection here that is manipulated in church services too, leading up to and sometimes on Christmas, where the idea of the responsibility of Joseph can resonate with some of the men coming in, and the joy of Mary can resonate with some of the women coming in. And that emotional manipulation runs deep in people who are sitting in congregation seats. Like if you are not happy about this story, if you are not super excited to see what happens with this baby, what is wrong with you? Because who doesn't get excited about babies? Right? Who doesn't get excited about something that everybody's excited about? Continuing the story, we have this decree that everyone has to go to their hometown to be counted. So because Mary and Joseph are going to get married, they have to go to his hometown. She is very pregnant. She cannot walk all the way there. So they get a donkey and they go. She's very pregnant. She gets there. There's no space for them. So she has to go stay in a stable. If you're familiar with the story, you're familiar with this, right? The design of this story is to be rooting for this underdog couple. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're dutiful in their commitment to each other, in their carrying out of this pregnancy, in their desire to be a family and to do what their leadership is telling them to do. And over and over and over again, they have these terrible things happen to them where they have to travel when she's pregnant and they have to go figure out how to travel when she's pregnant. And then, oh my gosh, they go and there's no space. And then they have to go to a stable. And of course, we assume that it's cold. And of course, we assume that it's terribly uncomfortable. And then she has to give birth in this barn. And that's so difficult for us to understand as we sit in our very comfortable temperature controlled sanctuaries, right? We are supposed to feel badly for this family because when we feel badly for them, we will celebrate more when the baby is born. And subtly and not so subtly in this story is conveyed the understanding of if these two people who have nothing, who are so obediently following God, can do all of this and still love God, then how can you in your very comfortable life, in comparably very small tests and trials and difficulties, how can you not? Like, how can you not see all of these amazing things that God did for this couple to bring his son into the world? How could you not love that? Right? I mean, come on. What's wrong with you if you don't? The buildup of giving and of Christmas spirit and everything is so intertwined with what has become the celebration of Christmas that we forget about the fact that Christmas was like brought into December because of wanting to sync up the celebration with the celebration of Yule. And there's so much we can go into about the fact that most of the Christmas traditions that Christians have adopted are actually pagan traditions. We can go into that for days. Like, that's not hard to Google though, so I'm going to let you do that yourself because it's not the point of this video. But the fact that all of this has been so constructed over the years to prime people's emotions to sit into sanctuaries and hear this story and see it acted out, right? Have you ever gone to church on Christmas Eve and you see this acted out and you've got teenagers who are acting as Mary and Joseph, or sometimes children, if you're going to this early service, acting as Mary and Joseph, which is even more insanely creepy, where you have them play acting, showing up and being refused entry into the inn. And then they have to go into the stable and you have other little kids who are dressed up like sheep and cows and horses. And they're in this stable with lots of hay around them. And then somebody, very trusting member of the congregation, hands them their baby, or you have a baby doll where they just act out this idea that Jesus has been brought into the world, and then the shepherds show up, and it's all very cute and very sanitized. And how could you not love this story? Right? How do you not? And if you love this story, then the very next thing that happens is the offering plate gets brought out, or the sermon happens and then the offering plate happens. However, the church you go to does it, but you're expected to give because you've been emotionally moved. If you take this story at actual face value, if we're assuming this story actually happened, where multiple people's will was taken away, a young woman was forced to carry a child she never asked for, and a man was forced to marry a woman he didn't have any expectation of marrying, take on the responsibility of a child he never expected to take on, who they were then forced to watch die 33 years later for nothing they or he had ever done. Like, is this the same story we're celebrating? Is this the same story that we're coming together on December 24th every year to be super excited about this baby who's laying in some hay? It's not the same story. But that story isn't quite as fun, right? And if, depending on the church that you grew up in or the church that you went to, sometimes you'd see like those graphics. And to be honest, I used this graphic when I was still in the church. So like, I'll own this, of like the cradle with the shadow of the cross, because like that gave the depth to this story about like he was born in order to be crucified. Like, what? Looking at a baby, knowing that that baby was born in order to die for punishment for people that the baby would never know face to face. And your obligation as someone in that church setting, if you care that this is happening, you will live in a way that this baby wants you to. Because if you don't care that he's going to sacrifice himself in 33 or whatever years, right? What kind of a cold-hearted person are you? The acting out of the Christmas story by teens and children has always felt very icky and very egregious to me, as you can probably tell. But underneath it, the use of this story and the use of the way that a lot of people feel about vulnerable populations, the way that manipulation is used by churches to get people in the doors, to get people to give, to get people to want to be active in the life of that congregation, that feels like a lot in general. And for people with religious trauma, this time of year feels like a lot, right? It can be really hard to celebrate Christmas and the Christmas season after deconstruction. So many of the things that you celebrated, so many things that you held really close to your heart when you were in religion can be hard to celebrate after. It's been a couple years since I've put my nativity scene up. My nativity is like snowmen. It's not people. I haven't put it up in a while. Songs that you loved, places you love to go, even most light shows that you go to see, right? Like all the ways that you celebrate, it is very hard to not have there's a Bible verse shown, there's scripture being verbally quoted, there's somebody talking about, hey, come to my church for this, there's a live nativity over here. Like it is very hard to not get triggered into your religious trauma while celebrating the Christmas season. And for some people, that means not celebrating. And I get that. That's totally fair. Also, it is fair for you to still celebrate while you're deconstructing if you want to. There's no set rules here. And just like the emotional manipulation is used to bring you in, you can refuse to be manipulated and actively engage as much as you want to. There is just no right or wrong way to engage in this time of year. But just in case you're feeling those feelings of this is not quite right, that's the point of this video, is to help you to understand what parts of this haven't been quite right for a lot of years and the reason why it's okay to feel that way. And the fact is, a lot of other people feel that way too. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all next time. And until then, take care of yourselves and each other.